Are you in a position where you're defined by your age, and that's limiting you to pursue a dream or goal you want to accomplish? The More Than Your Age podcast is about having conversations with women who fully live their lives without being dictated or defined by their age. This is a space to encourage women who feel blocked to pursue a dream or goal based on their life circumstances. Welcome to the More Than Your Age podcast. I am your host, Erica Pasbar. Let's start living life fully and become more than your age. You know those people in your life who are completely selfless, self-sacrificing, and are an encouragement to you just by being who God made them to be? My guest today is just that. I met Holland Ham when I was a freshman in college, and from the moment I met her, I knew there was something special about her. Anyone who meets her understands the infectious love she has and is blessed to know her. Holland's story of selfless love for a friend is truly inspiring and miraculous all at the same time. She generously gave away a piece of her in order to save a friend's life. She had a lot to risk, but knew she was placed in her friend's life for this specific reason. As you listen, I know you will be encouraged by the self-sacrificing love of a friend. Holland Ham, welcome to the More Than Your Age podcast. I am thrilled to have you here today. Welcome.
Thanks, Erica. I'm so excited to be here with you.
It is fantastic to see your face. We met many years ago, and I was a freshman in college, and you were just a year older than me, and you were one of those people who were just so welcoming, so kind, so loving. The second that I met you, I just knew that there was something special about you, and that is 100% a fact and truth. And I always have viewed you as a mentor friend. I like to call, there's certain friends in my life that I refer to as a mentor friend, where you're basically like, you're a friend, we're the same age, but you're so wise, you're a mentor, you're someone I look up to. And I think the listeners are going to be able to hear your story and hear just what you did and realize just the importance of who you are. And it just speaks of your character. And so I'm very thankful you said yes to this interview and that you are here to share your story. So thanks again, Holland. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Erica. I just adore you. I'm so excited to get to visit.
Yes, well, you have a very unique story that will more than likely affect people in a different way than the stories that we've already heard so far on the More Than Your Age podcast. Your story includes an immense amount of faith and bravery that helped save a life of a dear friend while potentially putting your own life at risk. I'd like you to just start off by sharing about your friend Holly and how the two of you met.
Sure. Well, I met Holly about, it's been almost 6 years ago now. Her and her husband came to visit our church and ended up becoming members at our church. And we were in the same small groups. Our children are around the same age. We just found a lot in common right away, very similar kind of lifestyles and values. She was a stay-at-home mom as well. And her husband is a musician like my husband is. So we just connected on a lot of levels and became really quick friends. But in getting to know her, I learned about her disease. She has what's called polycystic kidney disease, which is a genetic kidney disease that you inherit typically from your parents. You have kind of a 50% chance of getting it passed down. And she knew that she had it, and she knew that she was in around stage 2, stage 3 kidney failure at 31 years old. And that's when I first met her. We would pray for her kidneys, for her health. She would tell me about the different things that she would do to try to moderate her diet or to exercise, or just different ways that she was trying to slow down her disease. But eventually, as the years went on, it just rapidly took off. And the next thing we knew, she was in end-stage kidney failure, which meant that she needed a transplant right away. And so we started going down that road of transplant and learning about what that would mean.
So she was what? So you mentioned she was 31. Was that when she found out that she did have the disease, or was it like she knew that was a possibility? So was it a few years prior, or it was around age 31?
She actually found out that she had the disease when she was in her teens. I want to say 16 years old or so.
Oh,
That her mom had the disease, and so at that time they tested the children to see if they had inherited it, at which point she was positive, but she had no signs of any failure. And usually you're well into your 50s or 60s before you start to really have severe kidney problems with this disease. So she wasn't expecting to have things go downhill so quickly at such a young age. But at 31, she was realizing that she was not going to make it into her 40s and 50s, and that it was probably going to be in her 30s when she would end up needing the transplant.
so based on your knowledge of everything, like you just mentioned, there was a risk that she wouldn't make it by age 40 or 50. What, like for going downhill, what were some of the risks that at least she knew of from kind of the beginning before it got super serious?
Sure. So she would eventually have to go on dialysis, which would mean going to a dialysis center on a regular basis or having dialysis in her home every single day. And when you're on dialysis, you have no energy, you have no appetite. The idea of getting up and taking care of your own children would just be incredibly hard to do. You're kind of almost on your deathbed in a lot of ways. It's just a really hard time. And to have three young children, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old at the time that we did our transplant, and homeschools them all too. So trying to be on dialysis, also experiencing kidney failure, and take care of her kids, it was not the life that she wanted, and it was not the life that's sustainable. She would pass away within just a few months, years. You just never know how long you can survive on dialysis. It's just prolonging the inevitable.
So you're, being her friend and you're, praying for healing for her, supportive, listening to everything that she's experiencing. Then all of a sudden, how did you decide? Yeah, I think I want to be a donor. Like, can you walk us through the process? Because I don't think most people would go through that and say, I'm going to be the donor,
Sure.
or I want to at least see if I could be the donor.
Yes, it's one of those things that it's probably not on everyone's radar, but it was on mine. In praying for her and praying that God would heal her, praying that God would bring the right donor to her, whether that's a deceased donor or a living donor, you just begin to realize as you're praying that maybe you're the answer to the prayer, or maybe God wants to use you as the answer to the prayer. And there was one night a couple of years before our surgery that just kind of randomly sitting on the couch with my husband one night after the kids went to bed, we were talking about how Holly's numbers had dropped and how sad that was. And I just kind of randomly said, maybe I'm supposed to give her one of my kidneys. We're such good friends and I just love her, and maybe I'll do that. And as the words came out of my mouth, I didn't think it was that crazy, but the look on my husband's face told me that it was crazy. And he just kind of laughed it off and said, well, maybe someday we'll talk more about that. And we went to bed and carried on for another couple of years. But then as she reached the place where she was qualified to get a transplant, you have to go through a whole process with the hospital to be healthy enough to receive a transplant before they'll do your surgery. She passed all of those things, and then there was a link online that you go and you fill out an interest form, a medical history, things like that. When I went and did that, at that point, I just felt like, I at least need to apply to help my friend. And then whatever happens next is what happens. That sometimes you just do the next right thing and trust that whatever the outcome is, then you'll do the next right thing after that, and just keep taking those baby steps forward in faith and trust, and knowing that whatever is meant to be will eventually happen.
So to kind of backtrack just a little bit, so she, from the time that you heard about her kidney and her situation and how serious this was, up to the point where you were praying for her and you told your husband, what if I was the donor? through those a couple years to where you actually did that process, what was the timeline from the beginning through the follow through?
That was probably a 2 year difference between those conversations. And then over that 2 years, we didn't talk as much about me being the donor, but we talked a lot about what she was going through and what the process would be for her eventual transplant. And so learning a lot of the education behind how they do transplants, why they do them, why they work, why a living donor is so much better than a deceased donor, and just understanding the process more and more. I think even though in my mind I wasn't necessarily thinking about being the donor, it was still helping me to prepare my heart and prepare my mind for knowing what was to come just by having all of that information.
So you just mentioned it's better to have a living donor. For people who may not know, like myself, why is that better?
Absolutely. So a deceased donor would be, someone who gets in a tragic car accident, for example, and the hospital is able to keep their body alive long enough to remove their organs, and then they have to store them, contact the patient that's receiving them. There's a lot of downtime that happens in between with a deceased donor. Deceased organs typically only live for about 7 to 10 years once they're put into their patients. They just don't last as long. Versus living donors, they are able to do your operations side by side. So the organ is moved from one person's body to the next person's body within seconds. In fact, when we did ours, my kidney never really stopped working. It never died when it was in between the two of us. It immediately started working before they stitched Holly back up, which was just really unusual and something they hadn't seen before. It was really neat.
Wow.
But that just makes the longevity of those kidneys work so much better. That usually living organs last around 20 years before your body will eventually reject someone else's organ, no matter how good a match you are. The better the match you are, the longer that will take. But eventually your human body recognizes that there's something here that doesn't belong here, and it will eventually start attacking it. But the longer you can get out of that, the more years of life you have. And eventually you could get another transplant or go on dialysis, or at that point you may be at end of life stages anyway. But it's buying lots and lots of time. Living organs buy a lot more time than deceased ones do.
Thank you for explaining that. I remember when you announced all of this that was going on, you shared a lot of just the miraculous ways of what she needed and how you matched those needs. And I want you to kind of explain what that looks like, and also just in order to be an ideal candidate, explain what are some of those qualifications and how did you fit into that?
Yes. So first you have to be the same blood type. That's kind of 101 in order for your body. Your kidneys clean your blood, and so therefore it's really important that your blood types are the same, and that helps your body not reject the organ as well. So that's kind of step one on your medical history. You also can't have HIV. You can't be a diabetic. You need to not have had cancer in the past or an ongoing cancer. Just lots of clean bill of health type of things to even apply. There are some things they can kind of get around, but ideally they want a very healthy patient to begin with. And so they do a lot of screening for things that you might not even know that you have, which originally when I was tested, I kept expecting to get bad news back, that they were going to find something that was wrong with me that I just didn't know about yet. It's like the most invasive well check you've ever had in your whole life. So as they're going through and they're checking everything from your health to even your anatomy, that you need to have two kidneys. Some people are only born with one kidney and they don't even realize it. You have to have kidneys that are roughly the same size and they're not in a strange place because they float within your body. So sometimes they might be higher up or lower. They need to be in a relatively simple place, and your left side kidney is ideally the one that they want to take because it's further away from all of your other essential organs. So they're less likely to accidentally hit something while they're in there removing it. You need to have one main artery and one main vein that attach your kidney to the rest of your body so that they can make one simple cut on each of those. Some people have multiple arteries or multiple veins, which makes it very hard to detach and then reattach into someone else's body. So there was just so many different ways that you could potentially be denied as a donor. In fact, 1 out of 11 are approved to be a donor through the hospital that I was at. So I had a 1 in 11 chance of being accepted. And I fully expected that I was going to be in the majority of people and be turned away for something and then have to carry on with whatever that new result was. But instead, I apparently seem to have checked all the boxes and am unremarkably vanilla in medical terminology, which means that you just kind of look like a picture in a textbook, which is wonderful that God made me that way. And my left side kidney was just a really easy option for them to go in and detach and then reattach into Holly's body. And that's basically it.
Now, I know that usually in situations like this, the preference is that a family member would donate a kidney. And so, do you know, like, were those options of hers? Was she able to do that? And why, if so, why not a family member, and then why you?
For Holly, because it's a genetic disease, most of the people in her family have the same disease or they have had complications from that disease that then made them unable to donate to her. So, for example, her sister has the same disease, although it hasn't progressed as far, but she can't give up one of her kidneys. Her mom has already had a transplant and has the same disease. That's the genetic bloodline that it came through. Her dad was unwilling. He's also a little bit older and had some other health complications going on, but for a host of reasons, he was not a good option. So as far as family members go, she really didn't have anyone that was able or willing to do that. And so she was fully expecting to go with a deceased kidney, but the doctors encouraged her so much to look into living organ options because of the success rate being so much better that they said, put out your link on your social media and just see what happens. You never know who might decide that they want to try. You never know who God will provide. And so she did, and I think there was at least 50 people that applied to donate for Holly. I was just one of many. I was not the first one. In fact, on a Friday is when she came out with her information on how to apply. And I had decided that I didn't want to be the first in line, that I was happy to let other people go first. And so I waited until like Tuesday the following week before I filled out my form, just to let other people get a head start. And then the nurse called a few days later and wanted to talk through all my medical history and the blood types and things like that. And she said, well, on paper, you look really good. So I'm going to apply to Holly's insurance and see if they will approve you to go forward with the next step in testing. Her insurance actually paid for my entire process. So financially, there's no burden on a donor other than you might have to miss work or something like that. But her medical insurance pays for the entire process, the entire surgery, all the recovery, and anything that I would have had happen over the next 2 years that might be traceable back to our surgery in any way. Her insurance would also cover that. So there's really not a lot of out-of-pocket expense to being a donor, which is just wonderful.
So you fill this out. She had about 50 other people who did the same as well. When you were when you were contacted by the nursing staff, at what point did you tell Holly, hey, I did this? And then what was her initial response to you?
The whole process can be completely confidential. The hospital really takes it seriously that you as the donor are protected in every way from feeling any coercion from your recipient. And they want you to feel like at any time, even to the last possible moment on the operating table, you could decide to walk away because this is your complete free will and choice to be a donor. So they never tell the recipient anything. They would not tell Holly that anyone had applied. They would not tell her how many applied. They wouldn't tell her what step in the process the donors were at. She was completely in the dark. And because she's my friend and I know she's completely in the dark and just she's wondering and waiting over here, suffering in silence, I had to encourage her and let her know at least what I knew. And I decided I could be secretive about all of this, but instead I would just rather process this with my friend step by step. It felt like our friendship was strong enough to be able to say to each other that we wanted what was best for each other and that there was no pressure from each other. But what if she didn't want my kidney? What if she didn't like the idea of my kidney for some reason? Or what if something came up in one of my tests that would be not a game changer, but a game influencer? Like if I had some kind of blood disease that then she would inherit from my kidney, she needs to have the option, yes or no, I still want that kidney or not. So I was open with her basically from day one. After I got the call from the nurse that said she wanted to triage my paperwork and send it on to the insurance company for approval, I went ahead and called Holly and said, I just feel like you need to know that there are so many people and that there are things happening behind the scenes and God is moving and he is working and something's going to come out of this for you. I really think that there's hope. Don't just sit in silence and wonder if anything is happening. So when I got the call after that, which was that insurance had approved me and they wanted to do a blood test, it was going to be a blood test that both Holly and I had to do on the same day within a couple of hours of each other. And the hospital was very willing to make our appointments at, a morning appointment and an evening appointment so we would never see each other. But we talked and decided we just wanted to go together. So we made our appointments at the same time and we went out to Starbucks and we just made a whole little girls' day out of our going to give blood together. And she was able to just show me around the hospital and all the different things she had learned. And to be able to see it a little bit more through her eyes at that point was really sweet as well, that there were other patients there who are waiting for a transplant or have just had them and were able to look at them and see what that's like, if she had continued to deteriorate. She wasn't in a walker or a wheelchair yet, but that was definitely on the horizon as some of these other patients were, or to see people who had their transplants and the hope and the revival that they were having, and to think that could be my friend getting to live her life again. It was just a really sweet bonding time for the two of us. We prayed together that if God didn't want me to be her donor, that he would just close that door and open the door for someone else. And each step of the way, I would always tell her when I was going in for an appointment or a test, I would share my results with her, and we would rejoice together. Thankfully, we were prepared to cry together too, but every time it ended up being a yes, so we were always able to celebrate that. She was so good about not pressuring me, though, and always reminding me that if I ever wanted to walk away, it was okay. And just the fact that I was willing to even be tested or to even fill out the next form, like just what an encouragement that was to her heart. But I didn't ever feel like she was pushing me in any way other than just as a sweet friend. And it was the most special time.
I bet. So you mentioned that she didn't want you to ever feel, or she wanted you, like, if you felt like you could walk away, walk away. Did you ever experience those thoughts, or, of like, yeah, I think maybe this might be too much. I've got kids and my husband. Did you ever experience that?
Up until the point where I was cleared, I really was expecting to be told that I was going to be denied. I was preparing my heart so much for hearing bad news that they were going to discover one of these litany of reasons why I couldn't be a donor. I was so prepared for that when I got the phone call that said, actually, you're beautiful on the inside, you have a beautiful kidney, would you please consider giving it, that I had take several days to process that information and go from one extreme of I'm about to find out that I'm not healthy to I'm about to give a kidney away. Am I really going to do this? And at that point, I finally called my mom. I hadn't told her about it, and I knew she would be the voice of all the worries and all the what ifs in my journey. And so it was a long conversation with her, and she brought up all of the different things that I had been thinking about, but when you start talking about them with someone else, they become a little bit more real. Like, what if one of your kids needs a kidney someday? You won't have one to give your own children because you gave one to your friend instead. Are you sure you really want to do that? What if you have problems someday? Are you going to regret this choice? And just all of the different what if something goes wrong with surgery? What if something goes wrong in recovery? How are you going to take care of things while you're down and out? And thankfully, just in processing those questions, I still felt like this is what I was supposed to do. I had an overwhelming peace that this is what I'm supposed to do. Through every Bible study that I did, every sermon that I listened to, over and over again, I felt like God just kept saying, this was his call on my life, and that he had appointed me for such a time as this, that if he can clothe the lilies of the field and feed the birds of the air, will he not also care for me and take care of me every step of the way? Eventually, Holly and I found out that we were more than just a blood match. We ended up being a match on a DNA antigen level that was a 3 out of 6 antigens, which is the same level that a parent and child would match on a DNA structure. And that's completely unheard of when you're not biologically related at all. We are not sisters, but we match as if we were. And so when God showed us that, I felt like he undeniably assured me that this was his plan, that he had appointed me to be Holly's donor, that not only was my kidney healthy and the right blood type, but it was also such on a DNA level that we hopefully will get even more than the 20-year average. We might get 30 or 40. The record is 47 years for a living kidney to still be existing and working in someone's body. And at our age and with those kind of numbers, there's just no telling what God can do with that. And so even though it was scary, I felt like it was what I had to do.
I mean, just the fact, like I remember reading that and just seeing and now, hearing it too, just coming from you, the fact that it's like a mother-child relationship of a match that, I mean, how could it not be from God to say, yes, her body, this is happening to her body, but I'm going to provide somebody and you've met years ago and this person is the match for you. I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful story, a beautiful testament of his goodness and his grace and his love. And I think I just think it's beautiful. So this happens and fully like God is giving you this opportunity to donate your kidney. You also though have a husband and you have 3 children, and you mentioned talking to Travis, a couple years prior, and then he's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. But then now here's the time. So how did that affect him? And also, what were the conversations like with your children?
Sure. With Travis, at first he was not very excited. He was processing a lot of the what if questions, very similar to my mom. And then he just had this funny look on his face one day, and he goes, I just thought about what if I was Holly's husband, and just for a moment lived in his shoes and thought about his perspective and what would it be like to know that my wife is dying and that at any moment she could pass away, and then I would have these 3 children to raise on my own, and what would that be like to watch her suffer? And he said, I get it. I don't know how we not do this. I don't know how we don't at least try, because his relationship with Holly's husband is a very special friendship, just like hers and I. And even our kids play together, and we do lots of things as families. So it was very sweet that he has that same relationship, that he was able to think about that. I didn't tell our children until it was just a few weeks before the surgery, and we were definitely a go. There's no point in worrying the kids over a what if situation. But once we were really in that definite phase that we started being more public about it and asking for help because we needed people to take our kids to school while I was in the hospital and things like that. The kids knew Holly was sick. They didn't know all of the ins and outs of that, especially the littlest ones. But the older ones, they asked a lot of really great questions. We had a lot of really great conversations about human bodies and how our bodies work and how they function and what our kidneys are and where are they and what do they do and why are they important. And isn't it cool that God gives us two of them? And you really only need one to survive. You have one you can give away to somebody else who might need it. And it's conversations about generosity and about being other-centered and about how do we love people more than we love ourselves. It ended up just being beautiful in our household. They went to school and they would tell their friends, and just the testimony that would go on and on and on. Eventually all the teachers at my son's school knew about it just because he would talk about it and say, oh yeah, my mom's having surgery. She's giving a kidney to one of her friends. And the teachers would say, wait, what? And just the influence and the impact, you never know how many people's lives you might touch just by saying yes to whatever the opportunity God has put in front of you.
So I would love for you also to just walk us through. So you've talked with your children, they're sharing with their teachers, with their friends, and impacting them as well. And I'm sorry, I'm hearing, is there an airplane flying over?
There is an airplane, yes. The air show happens right by my house.
That's okay. And you know what? I'm just going to leave it in, and that's okay because that's just how it is. And that's how the conversation is flowing. But it was so funny. I was like, I have a good question, and this airplane is distracting me.
This is real life.
Yeah. So, okay. So back to where I was. So your children are, they're sharing with their teachers and they're sharing with their friends. And now we're leading up to the actual procedure. Like it is happening. It's going through. So, what, you, as you mentioned, that this has been given, like God has obviously ordained this to happen. And you're walking into the surgery room, the procedure. What emotions are going on at this time? What fears? What are you thinking about?
So many emotions, so many things. So this is February of 2021. We are still in COVID lands, especially when it comes to hospitals and visitors in hospitals and things like that. So they had told us that when we went in for surgery, our husbands could come and they could drop us off and they could be there during the surgeries, but they would have to go home at night and they could only come and visit us during the daytime hours, which was really distressing because we wanted our guys to be there. And how beautiful was it that they could be with each other and wait in the waiting room together and pray together and just have each other to lean on in that moment. But the hospital was preparing us for this COVID policy that they weren't even going to be able to be there. That particular week, the ice storm hit, as it always does in DFW, sometime in February. On our drive to the hospital, we were slipping and sliding all over the road that morning because it was starting to come down. It was a miracle that we even made it. We saw, I think, 5 wrecks on our way to the hospital that morning of our surgery. But we made it, both couples. We got checked in. It was every single hospital staff person we interacted with that morning either prayed over us or said something that was just encouraging and uplifting. I was crying all morning long, and it wasn't from being afraid. It was just, I think, from being so overwhelmed with all of the emotions. Yes, there was fear. Yes, there was anxiety, but also just joy and excitement and the number of people that were loving us so, so well. I felt so loved and cared for that I just knew that everything was going to be okay. So then with all of the ice, the roads were closed and the hospital staff said, there's no way we're going to make your husbands drive back and forth in that weather. I hope they packed overnight bags because we're making them a bed. And so the guys got to stay, and we ended up having the best time in the hospital, the 4 of us. We would kind of walk her down to each other's rooms and visit. And meantime, the grandmothers are here taking care of my children. And it was really neat because I had to lay out the whole schedule for the grandmothers. Here's what time for school pickup, what time for school drop off. We have soccer practice, we have cheerleading practice, we have all these things. And then the ice storm canceled everything. So the grandmothers are here at home with my children, not going anywhere, just baking cookies and building blanket forts and having the best time with the kids, that we just didn't have to worry about any of the details. And we were so worried about the weather because we knew it was coming going into the surgery. But the weather ended up being the coolest blessing and just provided for all the other worries that we had been wondering how they were going to all work out.
Wow. So when y'all went into the procedure, how long was the total process?
The surgery itself for me was, I believe, 3 hours. I'm sorry, I was asleep for most of it, so I don't know for sure.
You don't remember?
Holly's was a little bit longer. They started with me first. I was about an hour ahead of her, that they would wheel me back and put me under anesthesia. I remember going into the operating room. I remember I had the cutest anesthesiologist who kept telling me about how she was putting liquid margarita into my IV and it was going to relax me and make me feel so good. I remember seeing the operating room. I remember seeing the surgeon, and then you start counting back from 100 and you make it to 98, and then you don't remember anything until you wake up. Holly had to watch me be wheeled away, which was really hard for her to see her donor go before her. I think she was processing even more emotions than I was that day. And then once I woke up in recovery, they let my husband come and be with me. Eventually they moved us to a room. We were just down the hall from each other when we were on the recovery floor. Her surgery, like I said, took a little bit longer until she got to come back. But then as of that evening, we were able to at least go see each other and talk to each other. I think I was walking by the end of that first day. She wasn't able to walk for another day or two, but we could at least get around a little bit real slow, like little grandmas. But it was just really, really special.
I bet it was. So after that, how long were you both in the hospital?
It was a total of 3 days for me. So the day of surgery and then the full day after, and then late on the third day, I was able to go home. Holly was there for an extra 2 days beyond that. So we arrived on the same day, but then 3 days and 5 days roughly, which I think is pretty normal.
Oh, is it? Okay, I was going to say, that's not bad. I was kind of expecting a little longer, but that's good.
Yes, they're able to do living donor surgeries laparoscopically, or at least most of it laparoscopically now. So for me, it was 3 small half-inch incisions that they do on your front stomach. And then that's where the little laparoscopic instruments go in, and they're able to detach your kidney using those. And then once it's detached, they make a 4-inch incision just kind of right in your lower stomach, almost where your C-section scar would be. And they make that line across, and then they open up and pull the kidney out and then stitch you right back up. So that's one of the reasons my recovery was a lot simpler. For her, though, it's all open. They had to cut her all the way open right away. Her scar is more of a 6-inch scar. It's a little bit higher up on her abdomen. And then it's more open as they are reattaching. Reattaching apparently is a lot more complicated than detaching, which I guess that makes sense.
Makes sense.
And so her day's recovery, and of course they're watching her numbers and making sure that her body's not rejecting, that neither of us have any infections or any complications from the surgeries, hernias, anything like that they're watching closely for.
So you return home, and then what was the recovery process like then, and then up to kind of how are you feeling now?
Yes, it's a total 6 weeks recovery. The first week after I got home was pretty rough. I was pretty much on bed rest the whole time in a lot of pain. They give you a lot of pain medications, but one of the things about having only one kidney is you have to be careful about what kinds of medications you take, because your kidneys are helping filter the things in your body, whether it's medications or foods or toxins or anything like that. So you have to be really careful about the things that you put into your body. So not every medication is friendly anymore. A lot of Tylenol and then some specialty pain medications they were able to give me. So for the first week I was pretty medicated, unable to drive. I could walk across the house, but it would wear me out. So like to get up and take a shower would be my goal for the day.
Wow.
There was, trying to take care of the kids was next to impossible. We had a lot of support. My husband took off of work for the first 2 weeks and either worked from home or was here full time. We had grandmas here in and out. The church was amazing and brought us meals every night, so we never had to cook or do anything like that. The church also hired us a house cleaner who came and cleaned the house for those 6 weeks.
Nice.
She would come once every 2 weeks. Oh, that was delightful. The best gift
Like,
ever.
can we keep that on rotate for the rest of our lives?
It was a consideration for sure. I got a little spoiled. Because, when you're laying there in bed, you just look around and you see the dust on the fan blades above you and think about how you wish you could deal with that and notice things that you don't always notice when you're a busy mom. So, yes, 6 weeks total, 2 weeks of no driving. After the first week, I was able to get around a little better. I started trying to go on short walks, like just down the block and back to the house, little things. And each day you get a little stronger. Some days it's more forward, some days it's a step backwards, but then you kind of regain. By 6 weeks, though, I was back to working out and exercising and doing all the normal things. So really, after 6 weeks, life pretty much resumes as normal for a kidney donor. You just have to watch the medications and be careful of that. Let any doctors that you might have know that you only have one kidney, so they may treat you a little differently, or your blood work will come back a little bit differently than someone with two kidneys. And as long as you know that there's a reason behind it, it all will make sense. But any doctors need to know that going forward. But otherwise, you can pretty much eat and drink a normal, healthy diet. You can exercise. You can go back to work. You can just go back to normal life.
And did I see recently, I'm pretty sure I did, that you completed some type of running event. What was this?
It was a 5K terrain race. So it's like a 5K that has obstacles about every quarter of a mile. So you might have to climb a wall or do some kind of monkey bars thing or flip a tire, just it was fun. I did it with a group of friends that I work out with, and it had been kind of our goal. And for me, it was a goal that post-surgery, I'm going to get my act back in gear enough to be able to do this race with my friends. So it gave me motivation to not just keep laying around in bed all day and take it as an excuse, but to get back out there and see if I could. And the fact that I could still do things like that was such an encouragement that you really can go back to a normal life after you donate a kidney.
Yeah, you did it. Way to go. I'm proud of you for doing that. And they're really fun.
It was super fun. I want to do another one.
So how is Holly doing now?
She's doing great. So far, her body is not showing any signs of rejecting the kidney. Immediately, her numbers went up. Within 24 hours, we were still in the hospital recovering, and we were seeing a major change. Things like her eyes are brighter. Her skin was starting to get a little bit more jaundiced, and now it looks clean and beautiful again. Her energy levels are back. When she was moderating her diet before surgery, she was really moderating how much protein she could have at any day, just really scarce amounts of protein, because protein is very hard on your kidneys to process. And now she can eat all the protein she wants, which makes you feel so much better. As anybody who's ever done like low carb and low protein kind of diets, you just know how it makes your body feel differently sometimes when you do drastic things with your diet. So now just being able to eat normally makes a big difference for her. She doesn't fall asleep during the day. She just has the energy to be up and about and busy mom, homeschool mom all day long with her kids. She says her brain is a lot more alert, that she didn't realize how foggy-brained she had become. It was her normal for so long. And then to feel young again, to feel vibrant again, to feel alive in a lot of ways again has just been huge. She has to take a lot of immunosuppressant drugs now to help her body not reject the kidney. The doctors would really love it if she put herself in a bubble and not go out and go anywhere to avoid getting any kinds of infections. But she's 35 with young kids, and the whole point of having the transplant was to have her life back.
Yeah.
So she's kind of taken that advice with a grain of salt at the moment and decided that she wants to live and to go to the park and to go on the play dates and go back to church and all the things that she had been avoiding, especially during COVID. She was being so cautious. But now she feels like she has the freedom to go and to do. And she's had COVID since the transplant and has come out fine. Was sick for a week, just like most people with COVID, and then bounced back and has felt normal ever since. And as long as she stays on top of her appointments and her medication, and the doctor's monitoring her, they're monitoring me as well, just to make sure that everything continues to work the way it should, we go back to life and living and being in the world and being a part of it, and so much joy and so much fun.
That's beautiful. Such a beautiful story. And I think, I would imagine your relationship is really special between the two of you.
Yes. She is like my sister for life now. And we joke about it all the time that she can't get rid of me. I'm literally a part of her now. And that I think going through something like that just bonds you in a way that other people don't have that experience. There's nothing else quite like it. But I love it. I love that I get to be friends with her and get to do life with her for many more years to come, hopefully.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So I have just one more question for you. And so although this situation wouldn't fall under like a dream or a life goal to accomplish, it was an absolute risk to take to save the life of a friend, especially for you as a wife and a mother to 3 children. The risk was huge. We talked about what could have happened, and you mentioned too just how it was so important for you because of what she was experiencing in her life and what could have happened to her as well. You could have easily said, like, I can't do this. I have my family to care for. I'm, at the beginning, I think you mentioned previously before we started recording, you were only 38 at the time. You have so much life still to live, but you didn't say all of those things. And because of this, what encouragement could you give to the woman who may not have the same situation as you, but maybe wants to chase after a goal or help someone in need, but feels limited to do so based on their age or their current season in life?
I would say, Erica, it's a big world, and there's a lot of us, and there's a lot of things all going on simultaneously at the same time. And sometimes we get so caught up in our own little bubbles that we forget that there's so much happening outside of us. And if God, or if you don't believe in God, the world, whatever, something has been put on your heart to do, something is on your mind, it's there for a reason. And you're supposed to follow through with that and just take the next step with whatever that thing may be and trust the outcome, and then take the next step after that. That not everyone is called to do everything. None of us is supposed to do all the things, but each of us are supposed to do some things, and figuring out what those things are for you and just walking in faith with them. I think that's what a fulfilling life is. I think that's when you feel the most like yourself, that you feel like you're doing what you were put on this earth to do. And there's so much joy there. There's so much contentment there. And when you're not taking those steps towards whatever that thing is that's on your mind and your heart, you're kind of miserable and you're frustrated all the time because there's something you're supposed to be doing that you know deep inside that you're not. So I would encourage those women to just take the next small step, whatever that small step may be, and trust that whatever the outcome is from there, you'll take the next small step after that and just see where it goes.
Well said. Love it. Thank you, Holland. I appreciate you sharing your story and sharing a little part of Holly as well. I'm going to put in the show notes just information if people are interested about being a kidney donor, or if they have more questions as well, we can direct them to a certain website for that. But I just appreciate you taking the time and sharing your heart with us. So thank you so much, Holland.
Thanks for having me on.